Oh, I put a link to a YouTube channel with people speaking like they have media voices, professional ones, amateur ones. Everyone's using other people's reporting and cases. Even they're changing and making the real findings of cases. And the difference of that are collusions with the courts, still collusions with names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, their own names, names tied to them, their kids, their neighbors. Their roles with the state of Connecticut and demonstrably interstates, the corrections offices, judicial branch offices, the differences of guilt there or the names next to it or just traveling by it. All along roads and routes and at corners are manifest all kinds of demonstrations of where and how all natures of investigators have been used remotely, criminally for and influenced, and shown how to use everything that comes before them, including offensively to pretend things. There are people with the name Perron involved with I forgot the name, J.P. Morgan, and various names in the FBI, and Fox Connecticut News, and CBS News, WTNH, with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, involved with his educators and his conjunction to mayors and his daughter and his kids. And I don't even know their names. They went out of their way to put fake ties, fake natures ties to me. They have roles with the corner of also with people named Kerr, Cololo, DeMoro, at the corner of and people from other countries involved with the World Trade Center attack with them, with other natures of organized crime acts and predicate acts, identity theft, fraud, slanders, fake transcripts with police, fake conversations and ties to little kids with foreign countries, our own police departments, with the same house/S involved increasingly with predicate acts with them. Interbranch forging and switching names, refusing to get on paper while they've been stacked in collusions there and into their databases. Also with the FBI intercities of Connecticut intra, with the courts and their family members and their intimate ties before and after the World Trade Center attack. Every year since, WFSB has increasingly collusion/S with this, with people in my fourth grade class. They have roles with the campuses through time, where the differences of guilt of the intelligence to at the network locations or next to them is also exploited, and all along roads and routes and next to the state capitol. A whole bunch of people next to the state capitol from Wethersfield have been acting tied to predicate acts with facts in databases to pretend fake ties, fake natures, or ties to me, where there are recorded methods that a breaching method showed the investigators they have to use, like pretending they're speaking about free speech and making examples of it, pretending that when they know they don't have free speech. They know they have things they have to hide, and they have delusions relative. The experts on reason, too, the ones with badges, they've been putting fake transcripts in databases. You guys are refusing to get the interbranch of Connecticut and interstates on paper, one name and sequence. Get them on paper in the Britain Superior Court, Harper Courts, and the Connecticut District Court. A whole bunch of people involved with those courts are personally and professionally involved with planting predicate acts on my street rolls, mail crime, wire crimes, fake conversation transcripts, predicate acts. In other words, intercities, intra-cities, intercampuses, intra-campuses. Get them on paper, one name and sequence. I shouldn't have to beg you guys. You guys, they're playing the sense and sensibilities of Judge Napolitano because you demonstrably hit what is recorded next to Fox Connecticut News and what actually the value of what I typed on his Facebook pages was. And you guys hid and took away my Facebook pages also with Facebook, increasingly collusions with agencies with body dumping spots and with names next to them, and people involved with the Witness Protection Program and the FBI at the corner of Fairlane Drive and Griswold Street, with the people with the news, with the identity theft, fraud, slanders, with the interbranch at the same time. You get one of them onto paper, any one of them, including the sources of WTNH involved with the FBI all along Route 175 with identity theft, fraud, slanders. People involved in inter-services too, with the Paul Kelly and his neighbors, involved with some sexual medical offenders of kids. identity theft, fraud, slander. I didn't even respond to him when I was near him. I don't know him. They took a whole bunch of connections between people who tried to make it look like they know me by having other people film it and repeat fake things that I never had a word of conversation with, and people I don't know at all that were pretending of. And it's not because I didn't remember it, like this Joshua Julian. They had his name repeated to me by Ray Collusions as one of the ones with that name. More than one of them with that name involved with a Phil Collusions. On my street further than in now with a Bob Chase, with a principal obscure nature, and 1 years ago. And they had more and more roles of some untimely deaths and people involved with murders and their roles with intelligence communities, foreign and domestic, use the right to lie where they don't have the right to lie. Off Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, and Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut. They colluded with intelligence families from Wethersfield. And they'll tell you that because they also had those collusions faked for them. Increasingly, people tied to the former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and his kids. The kids of his co-defendants and their educators involved with predicate acts with fax methods between the campuses. A whole bunch of people tied to a Joshua Stryker have been with him, putting fake natures ties to me since I was a kid. He has collusions with sexual and medical offenders of kids with the intelligence agency, people involved with the Eric Oliveri and Craig Oliveri. And they sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm. They have collusions with my neighbors, with these people with some KKK, black theme, Latino theme, intercultural, a whole bunch of different countries involved with the judicial branch offices and names next to it, involved with an Oliveri family, a DeMoro family, an O'Brien family, and their educators, involved with predicate acts with fax methods against kids that weren't even in their classes. And they're spreading lies behind people's backs. So they can't get the right outcome, and then they have to hide those collusions in the future too, as was his relative, because these are people also with World Trade Center attack confessions relative after the attack, as ones who also brought the World Trade Center and other natures of confessions before it, long term before it, as ones who've been short term right next to at the World Trade Center, right next to it, including a court next to it. The court itself guilty with a sequence shift, proven after from inside the court had been affected, sequence shifts with legal papers, and names on all sides of the case, one of the cases, before the panel of judges in the Ninth Circuit Court, right next to the World Trade Center towers in Manhattan. You guys are preventing people from reporting crimes, and you guys have victims advocates involved with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, sexual and medical offenders of kids, sexual circles where women judges and prosecutors and their intimate ties have collusions with all kinds of criminally coordinated uses of investigators as the ones perpetrating the crimes and the worst furtherances of it, and differences rackets, their uses of their own differences, male, female, their sexual, in other words, and other people's. Every difference, sequence shifts. A whole bunch of people with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, involved with Hartford courts, plural, in the Brit Superior Court, personally and professionally at West Hartford locations, and with former leaders of the kids and their kids involved with the method through time. The same people involved with them and such methods in the same spots, intercities. They don't even know if some of them know each other. I don't know how well or by what, but they are everyone. They have other people facilitating such. They use the right to lie where they don't have the right to lie. For example, James Comey has summaries of the law like that, where they could get away with that. They're leaving out exceptions where they're not supposed to get away with that. And where they use that criminally foreign influence / hyper criminally foreign influence. And I speak it that way because it was non-distinctly too. The roles with the slavery sickly distinctly northern colonies, but it was southern colonies and northern colonies. It was simply non-distinctly too. And it was set up that way then because they knew everyone was going to break out of what no one wanted collusions with. And a breaching method was demonstrated by nature itself. Everyone was being non-distinctly hurt by the same thing, the breaching method. The breaching method knew that people would address that. Before it did, it knew it could sense them without knowing they'd be getting sensed through themselves. By having roles with natures of industries our founders told us to pay attention to. It's not just unfair. We're forced to pretend that A through Z, any one of them spoke for economies legitimately. In other words, America's going downhill because they have our founders right through our schools. They replaced with our founders, plural, communicated to had declassified for themselves, to have communicated for themselves. And one of the things is why and how. The only one of their names that they could let us know about was James Madison. So they directed us to understand themselves as James Madison. And they declassified how and why. Even once he was a president slash chief, he still didn't have free speech. These things are not debatable. You guys don't even allow people to be honest about the extortion of George Washington or what had brought this up. You guys were supposed to be honest about the extortion of George Washington. And about why and how George Washington had to come and counter-extort with James Madison's plan, how he had the means to do that, even though they had such the difference between the guilt of the internationally monitored conversations, questions forced answered, which were collusion slash S against selves and everyone else to an extent, specifically to keep any nature of independence, any nature of unity, incapable of defending that and of affording to be, let alone to protract short words properly by unity or independence. Nature shows us we are a unity as a human species, individual, independent body, independent from another species body. A whole bunch of individual bodies that make up each species too, not only our own species body. And that's how we are capable of discerning that one identity of value progression. That is not us and it is not them that has this manifest this way. To an extent, we can discern its body, where we can discern that comes with its body's complete identity of relationship to itself and the only increasing value of that here, or it is forced from here as a negative value nature progression of as a forced space nature transfer, as a waste of a special difference here, our own and Earth's. But the rest of Earth's species bodies, they aren't criminally for influence, let alone being and having been used by hyperforeign since before religious messages were born from off the campuses, making them collusions with itself. Now hyper additionally more reasons apparent, but the real reason is from off the campuses. This breaching method forced, tricked, turned, persuaded names A through Z as countries through its operators, locations, areas, and states forced them to blame other things other than themselves, things that it caused, exactly the way it wanted indeed, and encounters to that too, leaving out its roles with that and with use slash S of it, because those counters increasingly could not and cannot afford to be, let alone to protract short words by the name, by the identity the sciences share properly with syntax. Black pupils, whites of eyes, for example, are inseparable from any proper treatment of American history, let alone one worthy of speaking with aggression or with calmness. Black pupils, in other words, the difference, in other words, please get them on paper. Get me out for fake conversations with the interbranch and WFSB. Get them on paper. They're using wire and mail crime acts and methods. They already put me in fake letters and changed to fake digital and wire and phone and fake conversation with me being at the police station as a kid. And they faked conversation with me as an adult at the police station too, as their collusion slash S with ones increasingly involved directly and indirectly with people named Scalora, involved with Connecticut campuses like Central Connecticut State University, involved with FBI Director Robert Luskin and his defendant capacities, and before that, in a 2006 district court case, before the World Trade Center attack, Central Connecticut State University had collusion slash S through other natures and methods of organized crimes, and organized crime acts and methods they have collusions with. The same names, inter-campuses, inter-cities, and intra-cities. It's manifest where they have identity theft, fraud, slander styles, needs, and natures. as the identities of the law. A bunch of people, there's people with the name O'Neill I never met in my life. They have their kids recorded involved with whiting forensics, with state police families, with sexual and medical offenders of kids, years apart, leaders of kids' sports, years apart, as ones around their own kids, with the prosecutors, judges, and people with the intelligence community and West Hartford campuses. And collusions with names next to them, too. Criminally foreign influence, tactical collusions, raw, involved with the World Trade Center attack, too. All those countries, in other words, used remotely to the Saudi attackers. You guys have criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, raw readings of religious books too that are recorded. Not just your delusions and criminal foreign influences replacing black people's right to eyes, and what our founders communicated about how the breaching method reassigned, what nature communicates with that, when nature is not only itself as criminal insidious against nature. We're going to appreciate nature's system hypernetic pure. You're going to appreciate the difference between president / chief and why they're not compatible. Because we're supposed to be observing hyper additional nature, appreciating it. Supposed to be appreciating why and how. Real science does not leave out how and why we are an individual species body of a whole bunch of individuals. What is demonstrated to us with this black peoples, with different species body too. And while we have the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time, we have the identity of all things at once. That while it is not all things at once, but anyway, demonstrating to us, it's projecting this in a way that's projecting our volume's identity relationship to itself unlike any other one, except for the fact it is at the same time every other one. So we can discern it. Even if it is art, it is inseparably the difference between the order of the finite, the smallest finite details, or the active and grouped values, or the simultaneous values, the distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. There is also a hyper-simultaneous that uses how it values itself as a simultaneous nature, one way, unequally from the rest of its parts of itself. And in other ways, unequally, it values how it is a simultaneous nature, like juxtaposed with as temporary / lasting space nature. And some one way it values itself where it will mix. The parts that won't mix, except they will anyway one way. And this is what English was revealed to be taught, how English was revealed to be taught, and other ancient languages. And there was a function by having exceptions that are also the equal value to the people who ran the republic for which we stand in the Campus Marcius, designed to be and to stay being, led by that which is hyper invisible but still discernible distinctly from how it is invisible but still discernible, and how it is functional that way. Hear many pray, but now because there is a breaching method that has been from off all locations, hyper additionally, a presence with all negative nature, progressions, acts, and natures, all positives. With the difference of that too is collusion / S, to keep from our discernment the identity of relativity to ourselves of the breaching method, replaced right from the communications of America's founders, who directed for us to understand that the only one of them that we know the name of is James Madison. That's more important than we all understand. And that someone said, don't shoot you till you see the whites of eyes. More importantly is what they communicated about how the breaching method reassigned black people's whites of eyes communication. Black people's tribe here who disbelieves. Get them on paper, one name and sequence, please. So since I was a kid, the British Superior Court and people on off the corrections offices and judicial branch offices have been roles with predicate acts with facts, putting fake transcripts and acting tied to it into databases. These are also people collusions with the World Trade Center attack and the differences of their guilt as the sides involved, because there's a hyperforeign involved, just like it was non-distinctly northern colonies and southern colonies entrenched with slavery, and what our founders communicated about how that caused the Civil War. Besides how James Madison's plan caused the Civil War and the leverage behind that. It wasn't George Washington who had means alone to counter. They had to force the founders and the rest of the presidents. And we still have, in other words, even James Madison, once he was a president slash chief, he was the founder before George Washington. In other words, and we were direct. George Washington agreed to help them and to use that plan. That proves that he was counter-extortive force to an extent. That's also nature shows that. And Native Americans were part of that group. The only reason that appears to be debatable is because you replace what our founders communicated. James Madison would have had to classify for themselves and for us. I'm supposed to separate what witch trials are about while there's a witch trials place right next to Webb House. Right? Now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. Then and now, other communicated about that place than James Madison communicated with the founders about really why and how George Washington had to come there. About really why and how they had to leave slavery entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies, entrenched black peoples by a breaching method by such and by roles with such, and the differences of guilt as to hide behind and through, because its roles with the guilt too, the breaching method. And nature itself was projecting demonstrations of it then and now. Big branches bow and fall, but they recede. Here, wall, build wall. Don't disbelieve. Who disbelieve? Get down.